Welcome to part one of my recent makes video for April and May. I can't believe we're already near the end of May at the time of filming this, but I hope that your spring and summer sewing projects have been going well. If you're needing some inspiration or wondering what are some cute spring and summer patterns to use and what does the finished product actually look like, stay tuned. I'm about to break down some of my recent makes. Hi, and welcome back to Dine in Creativity. I'm Rachel Ann, and I'm here to share all about my sewing journey, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Still would say I am fairly newer to sewing, if I'm being honest with you, but I have been learning. At this point, it's been maybe 2 years, give or take a couple months, but I have really found so much joy in the creative process of sewing, selecting fabrics, and then choosing patterns that I love and am able to create garments that feel comfortable for me. If you're interested in talking about all things sewing though, before I get into the content for today, don't hesitate to subscribe. I do put out weekly videos on my sewing journey. Real quick, this is a top you may remember. This is my trusty simplicity pattern. I know that I'm a broken record. It feels like every single video I'm showing this particular pattern, but I can't get enough of it. And every time I make it, I had made this a couple years ago. This is a tablecloth I found at Goodwill, but every time I make the top, it ends up looking somewhat different than the previous versions that I've made. So it is by far such a great pattern. And then of course I'm wearing my pants that I modified from my new look pattern and really found a lot of joy in being able to modify the pattern just a bit. I did talk about these in a previous video of my recent makes, either part one or part two, about a month ago or so, a couple weeks ago. Feel free to go check that out. All right, let's get started with what I'm calling my crown jewel. She was a weekend, several day project, but I could not be happier with the outcome. I found this beautiful sheer fabric. As you can see, when the light is shining through it, it is completely sheer. I adored the polka dot pattern, and the polka dots are actually embroidered into the fabric, so it's a three-dimensional look. And I had also found this gorgeous peach fabric that I used as my lining for this dress. I found this fabric at my local fabric store. It's called Pinata's here in Southern California, but I have never fully, okay, let's put it this way. I have fully lined a garment before, but it was not done correctly, and it shows now that I go and look back at those pieces. This is by far the first time that I have lined a garment correctly and was so happy with the outcome. I actually watched 2 videos. One was by Sew Anastasia. I am going to make a point to link that down in the description below because it was immensely helpful. The other was by a sewist, and her channel is Sew Aldo, I believe. Either way, I'm going to link her channel also down in the description because they were both collectively very helpful in my journey to line this one correctly. Let me get to the pattern because this is a pattern I can't recommend enough. It was so delightful to sew, very straightforward. This is New Look 6693. This was View B. All I did, I made no modifications. Basically, I went straight off the pattern. I just lengthened it because I really wanted more of a true flowy long maxi dress. And that's probably one of the easiest modifications that you can do is just lengthen it. But this is such a great pattern. I would even say if you're not doing a lining for a beginner, it's just so straightforward. I'm trying to see what the rating is. With these new looks, it's always kind of hard for me to find it, but I would say it's a beginner / advanced beginner. Either way, such a joy to sew. Definitely would recommend. When I did the lining, you're basically sewing a completely second garment and then attaching it at the shoulders. I made sure to put all of the clean edges facing the front of the garment because I knew when the sheer material was over it, I did not want to see the darts within it or anything of that nature. I just wanted it to be almost like it was a finished dress underneath the actual sheer fabric itself. But yeah, there you have it. Again, this is New Look 6693. And as I already said, highly, highly recommend. So many fun ways to make this work. Now, to be honest with you, this next pattern I'm about to introduce is somewhat of a variation of this Simplicity Peasant top pattern, but it does turn out differently a little bit in my opinion. And it was this lovely little long sleeve peasant blouse. Well, let me show you the pattern first. This is Simplicity 11764, and actually, all right, this was actually Simplicity S9749. Grace, another sewist here on YouTube, actually shared with me that the pattern number is on the directions itself. So instead of me telling you the incorrect pattern, now we know it's Simplicity 9749. And I made view B. So I did make a couple modifications with this top. First of all, this is that dreamy baby blue fabric that I found from my local fabric store, all from Pinatas. And when I did the elastic, it does kind of have a sheerness to it, but with the elasticized neckline, it really did make it more opaque. And so I was very happy with that. The modifications I chose to do. So you're gonna have two front pieces. I did not want this seam down the front. So all I did when cutting those out was go ahead and cut on the fold, which then meant that when you loop the elastic through, you're looping it through in one continuous motion, I guess you could say, one continuous piece of fabric. If you decide to do it as the directions suggest, then they're gonna have you loop the fabric through one side, and then you go back through, loop it through the other, and then you sew up the middle. Again, I just didn't want the line down the front. To me, it just was so much cuter to have it the one blousey effect. As you can also see, it did not have a bow, but I sewed up this little extra piece of fabric that I had and just attached the bow to the front. I think it's so feminine and pretty and just adds a little extra something. It's obviously a fake bow. You know, you could, I guess, even loop this thin, you know, strap through it and modify it in that way. But I liked the faux bow look. And so I just sewed the bow strap right down there, down the middle. I don't want to undo the bow because I have it tied up just the way I want it to, but then you can actually tie it and it's completely attached to the fabric. So I just back stitched back and forth over it to really secure it in place. This is another one. This was an afternoon project. It was great and so much fun to sew up. The directions were very clear. Now, when you are sewing this, at some point on the back, they're all separate pieces. When you lay out the two side panel pieces, it's going to look very funky. Trust that sewing process and keep going by the directions. At one point, I even was already thinking maybe I need to modify these back panels because this is not looking right. I'm so glad I didn't, because then once you get all the pieces sewn together, it clicks and it makes it so that you can loop the elastic. Essentially, this is one panel of elastic that you're looping through separately, sewing it so that it stays, but then you'll end up looping the other continuous piece of elastic all the way around the sleeve. And if I had gone ahead, because it looked so odd and messed with that, it would have made it much more difficult. So this is one, looked real weird, just sit with it, trust that process. Great, great little piece for the summertime. I was realizing I have a ton of dresses I've sewn. I don't have enough tops. And so that's gonna be my next big push, is to really crank out some more cute tops to throw on and go. But again, Simplicity 9749, cannot recommend this one enough. And look at how many cute variations you can do. The next one I'm going to do, I am just going to leave it loose. This one, I really sat with it for days before deciding to add this elastic because it looked just as cute not having the elastic as it did with it. So it's really just your personal preference, but look, I mean, you know, per what I'm wearing, you know that I like that elasticized bottom, but that's gonna be my next one, is view A right here. Now I just have a fun little set. I'm gonna tell you exactly how I modified this Know Me by Mimi G 2021 pattern to make this very effortless, cute little top. It's really kind of almost like a linen cotton blend. And as you can see, it's textured, which I really liked that particular fabric. So this one was very fun, straightforward to sew. I am not gonna lie, I've worked with this pattern many times and modified it quite a bit. All I did for this particular top is I sewed up the actual front of the top. So it's basically two pattern pieces. You've got the front piece that you cut on the fold, you have the back piece that you cut too, and then the pattern calls for a zipper down the back. I didn't want to do that. I just want something I can pull over my head and leave the house with. And then it also calls, I'm trying to think the easiest way to explain this. It also calls for darts, I believe. Let me check here. Okay, the other piece is when you are cutting using this Know Me by Mimi G top pattern, the top itself, as you can see, it's an umpire waist. I obviously wanted to lengthen that because I didn't want a crop top per se. I wanted just a cute little blousey shirt. So you just go to how long you want it to be and lengthen the fabric itself when you're cutting it out. The pattern's just kind of your guide. If you want a square neck, that's also a very easy modification. The pattern comes out sweetheart neckline. Try to get close so you can see. When you're cutting it, just cut straight on the fold of the fabric. When your fabric is folded, instead of doing the little divot, you're just gonna go straight across. And really, there you have it. You're not gonna gather here at the bust because you don't need to. You've already lengthened it. And I wanted it to kind of have that little tent-like effect, just a slight effect. One thing, if you find that the sleeves then get a little bit wonky or there's almost some gaping on the back, I added these little darts right here in the back, which nipped that right in the bud. There was no gaping after I added the darts here, and it gives it a little bit of design to it versus it being flat. The other piece, if I recall correctly, okay, the other piece on the back, it's going to tell you to put darts on the back. If you want it to be the blousey pull over your head type situation and you don't want it tight to your body, just omit the darts. So really, you're using that pattern as your loose working guide and then making multiple tweaks, but they're honestly very straightforward to do. This one is the same. It's all French seams. All these pieces are, just to keep all that thread from unraveling. I wanted to do that. And then at the bottom, to keep it extra crispy, I just did white bias tape, just also because it gives it a little bit of meat or structure to that bottom. And there you have it. Super straightforward. Highly, no matter if you actually sew this pattern up per the directions or not, this is one of my go-tos. I have gone back to this so many times. I've made this dress multiple times, and every time I love it. So easy to make really cute modifications. Okay, then last but not least, I also went ahead and made this slip skirt in the same white textured fabric. And the only difference is that when I was cutting it out, I added just a little bit of excess on the sides because I wanted a true A-line type slip skirt. This one is also kind of flared out at the bottom depending on which version you make. I just wanted mine to be maybe 2 inches wider than what this pattern was. This is another one of those patterns. It's just a great go-to base pattern to have in your collection. The other modifications, I did not want to put a side zip. I instead did my elastic technique on the back, where you are stretching this piece of elastic out and zigzag stitching it so that it moves with the fabric, and then flipping it so it's a nice clean edge when you're wearing it. It's then kind of pulled taut like so. And on the front, I just kept it non-elasticized because I wanted that nice flat front version. And also it didn't need it. I didn't expand the sides enough so that I needed elastic across the front. And so that's just food for thought, another little tiny tweak that you can do depending on what kind of style you want to do. But again, this was McCall's 7931. I would highly, highly recommend this one. All right, last but not least, I think I said that before, but now this really is last but not least, and I'm still looking. I still have a couple other pieces, so I am definitely gonna be back for my part 2. You know, it's surprising. I didn't think I'd sewn up this much, but once you get going, sometimes you get in that flow. And I have my dress that was giving me the sewing block issues, and that's almost done. I just have to hem the bottom. I'm sitting on it for a little bit, trying to decide if I want it to be above the knee or keep it below the knee where it is. So once I get that figured out, that'll be on part 2. But I'm taking it back to this S9538, which I do talk about all the time. I am moving away from it, I promise you. But I wore this in a previous video, and so I won't talk long about it. But it was just a really pretty Crepe de Chine fabric that I had gotten on sale for at Mood. Very inexpensive, ordered it online, and it was just so much fun to sew with. The only real main modification I did was just leaving the sleeves blousey. I thought that this fabric would be exceptionally pretty just to have it blousey versus tight on my arm. And I'll show you what I mean. This would be the tight on my arm version, but with this fabric, it to me just felt really good, loose and open. But that is just something that you can do. And I did have some fabric left over. I didn't know what I was gonna do with it. It was a nice little big chunk. I self-drafted, honestly, this little slip skirt pattern just to make a matching set. And this is sheer, so I do have a slip I'm gonna wear under it because it's pretty see-through. I may go back through and actually line it. I also had this idea because, as you can see, it's not as A-line as I would like it to be, and that was due to limitations with my available fabric for this project. I only had gotten a yard and a half of it, but I might actually go and get some lace and have it insert a nice big triangular lace panel to make it more A-line and flowy, because as much as I like it, I don't love it to the point where it's a favorite piece, and so that will make it less likely that I actually wear it. So I really like that A-line shape for a slip skirt. But honestly, this one, when I say self-drafted, I mean, I'm talking, I measured my waist, measured, you know, my hips and everything, and then just cut out the fabric accordingly with a couple inches to spare on each side. I will go ahead and share though too, is that I added quite a few inches to the top and made it elasticized around the waistband. I did my usual, stretch it out, and then sew it with the zigzag stitch. And that is after you have done a little tiny hem so that it doesn't become all unraveled when you attach it to the elastic. So you wouldn't want to just do an unsewn hem or the unfinished edge to that elastic, because then you're going to get all those loose threads. So I just did that, and then you flip it, and honestly, you're good to go. But this is a really cute and easy set to look cohesive, walk out the door. You can mix and match, wear this with a different top. I actually have some leftover teal green linen that I may sew up into a cute little top to pair with this. But overall, you know, you can't go wrong with a matching Crepe de Chine set, and I was very happy with it. So this is all I have for now for part 1. I actually have to get out the door and gotta be at work, but I wanted to go ahead and get this first part 1 together. I hope you are having so much fun sewing up spring and summer clothing and your garments. If you've been working with fun patterns, you know I always like to hear about it, so feel free to share. But as always, happy creating and be well.